Hi, today I want to show you how you can integrate DeepSeek R1 inside of your Xano APIs and how you can stream that response back to your front end of choice. Now, this is super simple to set up. It just requires us a few things to do, and we'll be using the new real-time functionalities that Xano has now available. So let's get right started with that. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we have access to hyperbolic .xyz. It's a great place if you want to run DeepSeek from a US server. They have that capability, right? So you're not connecting to the Chinese API. Now, once you have that set up, we can select multiple models. They have Llama from Facebook, they have Qwen from Alibaba, and they have DeepSeek v3 and DeepSeek R1. Now, R1 is the trending one right now, so we want to take R1 for the sense of clickbait. Now, it is a little bit more expensive than v3, I'm not going to lie about that, but it has great functionalities, and we want to set that API up right now. So how about we're just going to go here on API, and we want to take a look at the curl. Now this is going to give us the curl instructions that we can use inside of Xano. Now a curl is kind of like a command, kind of like a documentation of this API that we can feed inside of Xano, and Xano is then going to parse it and set that up for us without having to manually do that. Now there are a few things we want to adjust in their interface though before we do that. The max tokens, we want to move this up a little bit more conservatively so we're not going to get content cutoffs, especially with R1 because it is a reasoning model, so you're going to have a lot of thinking tokens being used. Now temperature, that's already fine. You don't want to be too tempting with that because it's going to make stuff up very easily. And then you have a system prompt, right? Let's say you are Xano. That tells the AI what to believe it is, or what it should do, or what it's specialized on. You can use this section kind of like to provide training data, to provide general information. If you're going to make an AI, for example, that lets you chat with a PDF, you want to put that information right in that system prompt. That's going to give you that information. Now, here you go. You see we got the curl, we got the system prompt, we got those things set up. So we now want to copy this. Now, after we have copied this, we want to set up a new API endpoint and a new API group inside of Xano. Now, I'm simply going to go to APIs. That's our application programming interface. An API is simply kind of like a server, a part of our server that we can call that is going to execute a certain workflow for us. Kind of like Zapier, but with more functionalities tied to it. So we now kind of like want to create a folder for this API. I have a lot of them because I have a lot of YouTube videos about all those kinds of things. But if you simply click on Add API Group here, let's create a new one called Xano R1. There you go, Xano R1. There you go. And now I can simply save this. And now I can go on Add API Endpoint. This is kind of like the folder for the project. And then I want to go to Add API Endpoint. And one thing to watch out for, I would never suggest to use their CRUD ones unless you're building a to-do list app, right? You probably want to take the custom endpoint. In this example, here's a simple rule. You want to use get if you're getting an existing asset from data that you're storing, and you want to use post if you're creating a new asset. Now in this example, we're creating something new through an AI generation. That's why we want to use a post. If you were, for example, to create a new user, or if you're going to update a user, you're creating new data. For that, you want to do a post. If you're retrieving existing data that's already out there, you want to do a get. That's a simple rule to figure out which one you should use when doing an API call. Now, we got a post API, and I just want to call that question, right? Where I can simply add a question and ask a question to my AI. Now, you probably want to add authentication to that if this is a production app. Now, because this is just for learning purposes and for the sake of making a video, we're just going to have authentication disabled. Now, we're going to save this, and now inside of here, we can add our input. Now, we want to kind of like structure and think about what this API is going to do. Now, we have an API, we have an AI that we kind of like want to ask a question and we want to get a question back. For that, I want to add an input and I want to add a text input of question, right? Question. There you go. And now we can make this required because we want the API to fail if no question is provided. So we're not using API credits when the AI says, hey, sorry, I didn't get this, right? There you go. Now we want to add a function. Now in Xano, we're creating an API, but we actually now want to call another API. So let's go on function, and here's where it gets funky because we're doing streaming. We want to go inside of here and we want to look for streaming API request. Now, this is where the curl comes in. I want to go on import curl and paste the curl inside of here. It automatically already adds my API key inside of here. Please feel free to use my credits. I'll deactivate it after the video. And then we have some of the basic setup already figured out. We'll just keep it in there for training purposes or for debugging purposes, to be more precise for now. But one thing we want to change is we want to move the stream to be true. There you go. So we're actually streaming the data back because we're doing HTTP streaming. That's what that kind of technology is called. But we need to tell the AI that we want to receive a stream of data back. Otherwise, it's not going to do that. So now I want to import the data. And now that I have it imported, we probably want to move the timeout to be 120 seconds, so 2 minutes, just for testing purposes. And now because we're getting the stream, we want to go every time we receive a new streaming item. It's kind of like if I'm sending you 20 messages, one message at a time, I'm always receiving new data. I want to always fetch the latest one. What we can do to always get the latest one to then send it back to our front end, for example, is using a loop. That's how we get data that's repeatedly coming at us. So let's go inside of here and add a function, and it's called a for each loop. That's what we want to use. Now in this for each loop, it says list. The list, the data source that we are getting the data that is processed in this loop, that is always awaiting this information and processing it each by each. That's why it's called a for each loop, is the stream one. That's the response from the API, right? So inside of here, and we'll just keep this item. That's each iteration of the data that comes back at us. So we want to save that here. And in here, for now, we're going to use my favorite feature in Xano called the stop and debug, because that helps us, kind of like debug and figure out what the first items are. So let's go on item here. Now, something you want to be aware of, you want to go back to settings on the 3 dots on the top right corner, go on settings, and change this to be response type stream, otherwise it won't work. Now we can run this API. We don't need to add a question because it is already hard coded here from the response that we got, right? And now we should be able to run this. And it says perimeter question. Okay, because we do enforce that in the API, we can just put something in for now. And now it says error opening stream. That is something that can happen sometimes. So we kind of like want to take a look at this request. We have an external streaming API. We're doing the API call. Now, something that can happen is based on the model. It may be a model that doesn't support streaming. It shouldn't be. So let's take a look at that. Stream is Boolean true. There you go. So that should be all fine. Now, let's do an experiment and take a different model, because sometimes it's that the APIs don't fully provide streaming for certain models. We may have to resort back in using v3. So let's try a different model and let's see if that is actually fixing it. It could be. I don't think it is, but it could be. So there you go. And that's loading a little bit. And as you can see, that is actually giving us data back, because sometimes it seems like it's not working, but it could be because you're using the wrong model, because not all AI models support streaming. Now let's try again R1. Sometimes even changing a parameter and running it again could fix it, but we'll see. Now it's actually not giving me error opening stream. It's sometimes weird when you're working with streaming in Xano, but something that I found out is when you just copy the curl, sometimes, like a space gets in there. Sometimes there's something wrong with your documentation. So we always want to double check if it's not working. If you get error opening the stream, you want to kind of like manually replace some values and see what's wrong. It seems with hyperbolic though that the issue is sometimes you just want to put the name manually in there and it resets it and it will work. So that's something that's cool. Now we get this chunk, but it's not JSON. It's a mix out of text and JSON that's very hard for us to parse, to be fair. So in Xano, we have extensive data manipulation capabilities. So we kind of like want to get this now into JSON format to do things with it simpler. So now let's take a look at that, because what is this doing? Let's just first of all copy this JSON structure for now, and let's go to one of those sketchy websites like JSON Online Viewer with those ads. Here you go, jsonformatter.org. There you go. And now we're just going to paste the JSON inside of here. Let's take a look at that. And it's not letting, there we go, now it's beautifying it. So let's take a look at the data that we're getting back. We're getting back the choices, role assistant. And the cool thing about this API is, as you can see, it gives me immediately a content parameter. Not all streaming APIs are that well set up. Most of them just send you the first 3 chunks. Hey, I'm getting ready. I just wanted to tell you I'm not ready yet. And now I'm going to start, I'll promise. And then it starts. So you want to kind of like parse out the things that, you know, don't really work. But it seems like that they have it well structured. So we want to get this now in this JSON structure so we can actually parse it properly inside of Xano. A way to do that is by using a method in Xano called update variable that lets us update the existing item. We can go inside of here and go with update variable, right? And then I can take the existing variable, that will be item. The value will be item, but we do want to remove this little data thing because that doesn't look good. So we want to add a filter, and we can add a replace filter that will let us add any piece of text and remove that out of a string, out of a piece of text. So we can just remove this and we'll replace it with nothing. That'll effectively remove it. You don't want to use remove, it actually causes errors. You want to use replace and replace it with nothing. That's the way to do it. So now when I move the stop and debug under the update variable, as you can see, when we get that chunk back, so it says error opening stream again. Sometimes when you're debugging, it can happen. You want to reload the page and try again. There you go. It still says error opening stream. Interesting. Let's try again. Let's try again making this v3. Shouldn't be the issue, but it could be that it's actually using the wrong model. Okay, now it says error opening stream again. And now it works. So sometimes this is also dependent on the reliability of your API, right? And if you're on a free plan or not. But there you go. I do assume DeepSeek gets some traffic. So you may want to kind of like, you know, be prepared for those kinds of scenarios to kind of like show downtimes on your UIs when necessary. But there you go. So we did remove the data colon thing, and now we just want to do JSON encode this. So let's go back to our update variable again and add a filter of JSON, actually JSON decode. So we get it as JSON back, right? It turns the string, which is text right now, into a JSON format. You can differentiate it, a string from a JSON format, because in a JSON format in Xano, you're going to have colors here. You can collapse those things. That's how you know it's JSON, right? So we do get this parameter back. Now, the thing that's particularly important for us is the content piece. So I can copy this here and kind of like take the subpath when I send the data back to the front end when I do the stream. So this sounds weird and this sounds funky, but it's very simple. Let's go back inside of here and type in stream. And we do see a streaming API response. For that, I'm simply going to take the value here of item, and then I go on subpath. I paste the payload that I copied from here, click on define, and take the content. That's what I want to return, right? If I go back to item, go inside of here, you'll see that I have the content subpath here under choices, delta content. There you go. We should be able to run this now. And now I can actually remove the stop and debug, run this again. And after the stream was completed, we should be getting an array of all the chunks of the stream. That's how we call those separate items that get sent back to us in an HTTP streaming request. They're being called chunks. That's when you say hello, it's going to do H, E, the O, the H, the L, that those individual pieces are being called chunks. So as you can see, it's still running the request. It can take a little bit to stream those back, but because you're doing a streaming request, and that's probably why you want to do a streaming request, is when you receive those chunks, right? They are going to not cause any timeouts on your front end because it comes back as a stream. So now we're going to see error parsing JSON syntax error. What's probably going to happen is that the last chunk is going to say done or something weird that we can't parse as JSON, right? So for that, we actually want to debug it. And a simple way to debug it is to clone the streaming API response here and just return the item, because this will give us a lock. So we just return the item here and then we just hide everything below it for now, because this will give us a cool lock that we can look at. And again, we want to try that in the editor. It's still a little bit funky. Sometimes it open it, sometimes it don't, right? But you shouldn't have that issue on your front end necessarily. But there you go. So as you can see, now it's loading and it won't have any errors parsing the item itself. Now it's not properly parsed and we won't be targeting the content, but I do expect that the end of the API is giving us something like done or something that's not necessarily JSON, that can't be parsed, that's causing that conflict. That generally is one of the number one errors that you have when you're working with streaming requests, but it shouldn't be complex. So take a look at that. We got that here. I do expect the error to be at the last one because they all look like JSON. They all look fine to me and they all seem to have the proper structure. Now, I'll be doing a lot of scrolling because we're doing a context-based AI generation here, right? So we get lots of chunks because we get the thinking data back. So that's something you want to consider. You're going to use more tokens using DeepSeek R1, and you're going to spend more money on those tokens as well than using DeepSeek V3. DeepSeek V3 is not a reasoning model, right? So you won't get like 50 lines of, hey, what should I greet the user with? He said, hey. Should I say hello or should I say, hey? What's more casual? Something like this, right? But that's kind of like the difference. It's going to give you better results, R1, but it's going to be more expensive per million tokens and it's going to use more tokens at the same time. V3 is going to use less tokens and it's cheaper by the token. Now that is what I told you at the end. Most of those are just telling you done. So you only want to parse JSON and return the stream when it's not done. We can simply solve this by just adding a condition just in here, right? And we can go on add condition, and I can go inside of here, and I can go item, and then I do does not equal done, right? That's what we want to do. So now we actually need to split up the variable a little bit. Let's delete this, right? There you go. And now we want to move the update variable over the condition, so actually removing the data part. Or actually, we don't need to do that. A simpler way would just be looking based on this piece, right? Because what we're doing is we're doing two filters in this variable. We could have two variables, just one filter replacing it, but it's not really necessary. We can just look if this is data colon space done, right? So we can take this item, that's the item it loops over, right? And the condition needs to be that this doesn't equal the last part. That's how the last part looks, right? That's what we're doing. So it skips the last one. And then when it is not this, meaning it's anything above here really, what we want to do is you want to remove this data part because that stops us from parsing it as JSON. And then in here, we'll take this JSON and we'll parse it. So then what we can do is we can do the streaming response right under it, right? And then we just do item.choices.0.dela.content because we can only use Xano's subpath feature if we have it parsed as a JSON format. I forgot to breathe for a second. Always breathe, that's healthy for you. There you go. But now we can delete the stop and debug. And now we should be able to publish it and it should be ready for production. So let's try that out. Let's run this request again. It's going to take a while. Sometimes it has error opening stream. Just don't get confused by that. Take it easy. And now we should have that all working, and now we should be able to connect this with any kind of front. It could be WeWeb, it could be Toddle, it could be Whist, it could be Webflow, it could be Flutterflow, really whatever you want to do. And that is how you flexibly do that using Xano. And streaming is quite cool because it gives your application a great interface. So we'll wait a little bit, and we should not have any error parsing JSON coming back. And then we want to do some few final touch-ups to make sure that this API actually beautifully works. It can take a little bit, but because of streaming, we're not going to have browser timeouts, because the browser times out when doing API calls that last longer than 30 seconds. Streaming is going to prevent that from happening. So now you can see I'm getting all those chunks coming back to me. There you go. Isn't that nice? So now I want to kind of like go in this API request here, and the content here I want to kind of like change the system prompt. I say, you are Xano AI trying to sell me a membership at https://nocodeprocode.com to learn more about Xano. It's my community. You can join now if you want. If not, have my AI sell it to you, right? There you go. Let's give it no context. I think that'll be fun to see what it responds with. And then you see the role user in here in the content. That will be the user question. So put the question inside of here. That's the final touch. And now it's ready to be connected with any front end that supports HTTP streaming. Now, in this example, to have a simple example, we're just going to use a front end NoCode tool, or they're now rebranding. It's not NoCode, it's now visual development, but it's still NoCode, called Toddle, right? But WeWeb works very well too, works great with Xano, right? But we're going to use Toddle just because I'm more familiar with that today. I'm sorry for any hardcore WeWeb users watching this today. I know most Xano users are WeWeb users, but today we'll learn something new. So inside of here, we want to set up the API. For that, we want to click on plus. It's pretty similar in WeWeb too. And now we want to paste our main URL and then set that up inside of here. So we'll copy our URL. We'll go back to our front end, set up that API, click on continue. We'll make it a post request. And then I can call this, for example, generation. I can name this whatever I want. Now, there are a few things that your front end tool should probably take a look at. We probably want to go to advanced settings here and parse as text. Right? Or probably let's do auto for now, right? Because we're doing with HTTP response. Now, we also want to add a parameter with our question, right? That is the parameter that this API is receiving. So let's go back here to our front end, and let's go inside of here and let's add a parameter with our question. Let's put the question inside of here, and let's just call it hey. For now, we'll just hard code it. Now I should be able to run this API, and as you can see, I'm receiving the chunks streamed back to my front end. There you go. Look at that. And I can, I'm just receiving the chunks inside of here. Take a look at that, and it's coming back to my front end. So that's cool. The request is loading and it is working. We now probably want to have this work a little bit dynamic in kind of like a form. To get that working, we can just simply use a form in our preferred front-end tool of choice, add a text area to that form. Oh, not a text input, probably a text area, right? A text area. Okay, now we're going dark mode apparently. Let's make it dark mode. I don't like dark mode. Let's go inside of here. And we want to make this gray. Oh, it's not the form. No, excuse me. We want to take this, we want to probably make it fully white, and then we can take the form, and we can give it, you can style it nicely. We're doing backend stuff, but doesn't mean the front end can't look nice too. We'll do 0.5 rem, we'll give it a background of gray 50, we'll give it a border of 15 pixels, and we'll give it all gray 200. Doesn't have to be stunning, but it should look nice. There you go, we'll add some border to that too. Excuse me, all hardcore backend developers watching at this. But there you go. Now we have my question. I want to create a variable called question. And we'll start that out empty. I will simply go to my text area, bind that to my question variable. There you go. I'm all set up. I can just change the placeholder. What is your question? What is your question? I can put that inside of here, right? And then we can simply go inside of here and actually, little thing, because I'm a little bit lazy, we can simply duplicate this and just change this from being a text area to being a div block and just remove the attributes. And then go inside of here, remove the class, and just add a text area inside of here to stream the response back. And then we just go back inside of here and make the text black. And then we go in here, also in the text area, make sure the text is black as well. There you go. So we now will have the AI streaming response, and then we just need to go back to the form and add a gap of 0.75 rem. Then I can go back to the form, add a button that will submit the form. To style it nicely, we can just do width, the 100%, center it. You can keep that, make it 10 pixels round. There you go. I'm going to call this generate. Generate. We're good to go with that. Now we got it generating, and then I just want to go on here, add an attribute, type, submit, so it submits the form. Then we go on the form, we go on events, we go on click, we go on click, and we go on generation, and now it's going to run the generation API call. Now, inside of Toddle, we need to create a variable to show the streamed response. For that, I want to go inside of here on variables, and I want to call this response. And I'll start that out empty. And then I will go in here to the text, and then I will go on FX, and then I can go on response, and now it will stream the response back. There you go. And now we got that nicely working inside of here. And yeah, there you go. So now I can simply go inside of here and go on the FX, and then we just are going to show the response. Actually, we don't need to have a response variable. Now that I think about it, we can remove the response variable. We already have some sample data. We can simply go for the response, go on FX, and go to the API, take the API data response. We can add a map filter to map it, take the data, and now this should actually parse it correctly. It's not really doing it correct. It adds a bunch of stuff that we don't need. Let's take a look at it again. Event, no. Okay, I think it's because we're auto parsing it, maybe. Got a lot of commas in there. Sometimes, auto parsing is not a good idea. Let's try text, and let's try running this again. Let's see. Should be coming back. It looks way better. There you go. And now we want to take a look at this again, at that formula. So yeah, we're not parsing. Let's take a look at data. Yeah, it's not taking the, hey, it gets me the error, it gets me the data, right? So let's actually try text parsing for that. We had auto, it may thought it was JSON or something. So let's go back to the advanced section here. Oh, we did have text parsing. So how about we do, we're not doing an image, right? So JSON stream, auto should work. I'm just confused why it does the comma. We probably may need to then actually do a custom action for this. So let's try text parsing again, because that seems to get the information right? It gets the formatting correct. Yeah, that looks good. Hey there. So now we're just going to then do that with a custom formula a little bit. So we got the step here. We got the data. We got the colon space. So let's try a split filter to do colon space. And now I can see, let's just remove the map for now. I got my split filter of colon space, but it kind of like splits everything. So we need to do a few things. Let's go back and let's do this can get quite messy working with those things. So we want to do a map filter here. We can do a map on item. So we do inside of here, we got the generation, we got the data. Oh, now I see it. We get the whole stream coming back. It's not parsing that properly. Let's see. So that is something that's actually happening that's weird with Tuttle. So let's try auto parsing, and then that may be our last resort. Let's try that again. If that's coming successfully back. It looks good, right? So let's go inside of here again, inside of the text, and let's take the generation data. That looks well. Let's try a map filter. Let's try data. That looks good. Oh, the commas are because it's in an array. My bad. We just want to use a join filter then. And we want to have no separator when we join them. And that is doing the streaming. Nice. Now, we're still it still seems like we're having issues in parsing spaces and all that kind of stuff when we put those things together. That is interesting. So that's just something that's actually quite funky with Toddle a little bit when it comes to parsing. JSON stream. We may actually want to have some sort of custom formula taking care of that for us, because I do think we're kind of like removing, but we're not really actually removing any white space. If I go inside of here, interesting, very interesting. So yeah, let's just get it parsing working. Let's hope you use another tool or you get that other part figured out. We'll more focus on the Xano part today. So it may not be parsed nicely. We'll just add a map filter inside of here. And we're going to take the data, and then we should have that set up inside of here. We should do a join filter, and then we want to remove the separator, and then it just doesn't do the parsing correctly. But that's something that we can figure out. I'm curious that if we use a variable to track the state, if that would fix it. But for now, let's just try it this way so we can kind of like demonstrate it. For now, we got that. We just keep the height. Let's just go layout, X, clip, Y, scroll. There you go. Now I should be able to scroll and see my response. So let's say, hey, and let's have it generate something. Now it's not doing it on form because we're not doing a form submit. So actually I have added it on a click event. We want to fix that. So let's go back on the form. Let's go on submit. Let's paste it inside of here. I can't wait for the day where an AI is doing this job for me. There you go. And now there is null, right? We can probably remove it, but let's just say, hey. And now you see it's coming, it's streaming the data back. Are you ready to take your no-code skills to the next level? At NoCode Pro Code, we're all about helping you master tools like Xano, the ultimate backend, right? It streams back. Now the streaming isn't nice because sometimes if the streaming is coming too quick, you can just simply add a sleep in your Xano endpoint. So you can add a sleep of 0.2 seconds, for example, to have nicer streaming coming back. So it doesn't go in bigger chunks because Toddle is probably, if you use Toddle, kind of like doing some sort of debouncing. So let's take a look at this. Now the streaming should look nicer. I can say, hey, and now it should return our message. Or not. Let's take a look at that. Let's run it from here. We probably get error opening stream a little bit. Hey there, are you ready to take your no-code skills to the next level? At NoCode Pro Code, we got the ultimate resource for learning Xano, the powerhouse backend for no-code apps. Whether you're building apps, managing databases, or scaling your projects, we've got you covered with a NoCode Pro Code membership. You'll get exclusive Xano tutorials and all that kind of stuff. So that's cool. What I actually found though, it seems like the parsing, the auto parsing in Toddle is kind of like removing the spaces, which is not ideal. So that's probably where you kind of like want to create a custom formula to do the parsing, to keep the formatting of the text it's going to generate. Or you could prompt the AI to add kind of like a break in between everything it generates and then handle that on your front end with some JavaScript to replace that with some white space. But that's how you set that thing up in Xano, and the star of today's show was Xano, because that is a super fast way to get this kind of functionality inside of your application. You just want to use an API that's reliable. And actually, now that I look at it, I think we're not using R1, we're using V3. That's why we're not getting the thinking tokens. So let's just do R1 for example real quick so we can take a look how those responses look. So we should be able now to generate this again. And you'll see it says think. Okay, the user sent hey. And now it's going to think why I said hey. Do I want to break up with the AI? What's going on? So it's going to think about all the worst case scenarios. What's going on? What does he mean? Right? And then after that, it's going to respond back. What's up? Hey. Like one sentence usually. So that's something you want to consider when you're working with text-based reasoning models. They're going to reason a lot about things that don't really need much reasoning. Depends, right? If you're going to make a chatbot, don't use a reasoning model. If you're going to build an AI code generation app like Cursor, probably use a reasoning model, right? You may want to reason what the user tries to accomplish here. But they're going to come at a way bigger price. It's 2 times inflated price. It's one time. It takes more tokens. Also, the tokens it's using are more expensive. So keep that in mind. You're paying twice for using reasoning models. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate that. And if you want to learn more about Xano, I would highly suggest you to take a look at nocodeprocode.com. That's the community we have inside of here. Actually, that's the inside. I shouldn't show you that. It's top secret. But let me show you the landing page. That's even nicer. And we got the landing page right here. It's the best way for you to learn Xano. We have daily office hours to help you when you're stuck with, your stream not opening, or some error in your, some error in your API, some error in your endpoint, some things you're unclear in your database. We got the templates, we got the tutorials, and we have the daily office hours to help you overcome those roadblocks, because the backend, a lot of the times, can be scary. And this membership, this community is here to give you daily resources that you can join interactively. You can ask your questions, and I'm going to help you and our beautiful community of other people who are like you, building amazing stuff, will be able to give you the support and the help you need to solve your roadblocks faster, on a daily basis. Xano has office hours too, but they're on a weekly basis, or I think even less regular than that. And if you want to make sure that you always have the availability to access knowledge when you need it, to ask someone to have someone look over that and guide you through fixing that, you probably want to join nocodeprocode.com. That's the daily resource Monday to Friday that gives you access to those things and helps you overcome roadblocks in Xano once you face them. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate that, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and definitely check out nocodeprocode.com. It's probably worth the investment of $99 a month. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate that, and see you soon. Take care.